Lucky you!
Best 36 holes in golf.
You tuned in to Alternate Shots Podcast,
Arnie's Army.
where we talk about golf,
Barkeys, Sandy's,
poker,
Bond, James Bond.
horse racing,
I'm all in.
great movies.
Alfred Hitchcock.
We have no script.
And down the stretch they come.
We're glad you joined us.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Whoop. Let's start again.
I'm sorry, but James Bond can't be a girl. 007 can't be a girl.
Thank you. 008 can be a girl.
Yeah, but 007, that's James Bond, that's a man, it's only going to be a man.
Nothing like the match that Sean Connery and Bert Frobe had at in Goldfinger, where Bond misses a short putt at the end, and then it's like strict rules of golf. You played the wrong ball. He enjoyed that so much. That round was played at a place called Stoke Park in England, and it was a Harry Colt design, 1908. It's used for other things. It was in another James Bond movie and some other movies. It's a big old palace-like looking place, and I guess it was just recently sold for $79 million, and they're going to read up on it. But Harry Colt was pretty major guy back in the day, so it's interesting that Odd Job was caddying on a Harry Colt course.
Those golf courses would have plenty of caddies, and they carried one bag.
Yeah,
You got a bit of a story or a yarn every other hole from the guy, and might have had a bottle in his bootleg.
yeah.
But yeah, that remind me. First encounter was at the Fontainebleau Hotel. This
Correct.
is what I like about this: the journey that you go through. We've gone from Miami Beach. That's where we start this.
Yeah, yes, and where he interrupts Goldfinger's cheating gin game. Goldfinger has the headset on, and Shirley Eaton, I believe it was upstairs. He just picked up the Jack of Diamonds. That's the 4 of diamonds now. Giving Goldfinger the look, and it always, I was always like, this is a guy that's got all kinds of gold. He flies all over the world. He owns clubs, and he's cheating at gin.
Reminds me of a couple of people that we know.
Yeah, they were playing 10 cents a point, I think, and it was Bond gets on the headset and says, "Let's say you lose 10,000. Let's be generous, make it 20 or something like that." So.
Good technology back in 1964. They had that two-way radio where she was on the penthouse floor out in the balcony.
Yeah,
with the lens looking right down on his hand, right?
Yeah,
She had the little thing in her ear.
Yeah, and Sean Connery hits the mic, back. He's like, whoa.
But also what I like about Bonds, before we go into the golf, because we're at the Fontainebleau, is the opening scene goes from a scene where a figure skater is skating in an indoor ice rink in Miami Beach at the Fontainebleau Hotel, and then you see Dink or whoever it is giving him a massage at the poolside when
in his cute little terry cloth suit.
Yeah, right. So now he gets the assignment, and now what he heads over
as James Bond always did to his nemesis, is he agitated the hell out of them. He didn't really sneak up on them. He burst on them and gave them, broke their chops as much as he could on every level, whether it was at the baccarat table or the roulette wheel or wherever it was. He let them know, I'm here and I win these games, which is the greatest thing about James Bond is he always wins. You can count on it.
But you have to remember that opening scene in Dr. No, when he's at the first time you see James Bond ever.
Yep.
And he has this unfiltered cigarette, and he takes the gold lighter and lights it. And everything he did was cool.
Yep. James Bond.
So
he shows up to play golf with Goldfinger, and at one point he drops a gold bar on one of the greens or tees, which catches Goldfinger's
right on the
attention.
green. It was on the green, right there on the first green. What are we going to play for? And drops the bar.
Yeah. I hope he had a divot repair thing. Yeah, so they play for that, and Bond catches him cheating. Odd Job drops the ball out of his pants. Oh, it's over here. And Bond's caddy says something like, I don't think that's his ball. And Bond's like, it's not his ball. How do you know that, sir? Because I'm standing on it. So he switches balls, strict rules of golf, and he ends up, winning and agitating Goldfinger even more to the point where Oddjob cuts the statue's head off, throws his hat and cuts the statue's head off. And Bond says to Goldfinger, the club secretary is not going to be too happy with you. Oh, I don't think so, Mr. Bond. I own the club.
Yeah.
But that's where that was their second encounter with each other. And Goldfinger even says, this is the second time you've monkeyed with me. I should think the first time would have taught you a lesson, because, the first time he ends up painting Shirley Eaton gold. She suffocates her by painting her in gold.
Yeah.
I remember I was young. I was like, wow, this is kind of yikes. Painting somebody head to toe.
Yeah, it was a little racy too, because she had no clothes on.
Yep.
And
Bonds were always a little racy.
Right.
They never went too far, but they were always knocking on the door.
There are never any bad looking Bond girls. I can say that.
Yeah, especially like in the opening scenes when the theme songs, you'd see these people dancing around or swimming around, or whatever.
Swimming around or coming out of gun barrels or straddling gun barrels. The credits are probably there's no better movie credits that I've ever seen. That I always made it a point, and I still make it a point, if James Bond is coming on one of the TVs, if I don't have time for the whole movie, I'll watch the credits, because the credits are always very well done.
They give you a little piece of the plot.
Yeah.
And then the credits, and then we'll probably have to play the famous James Bond theme song here.
Yeah.
If we can find it, dun, 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 and then that's where that would come in. And that was the most warming part of the movie for you, when you heard that music. And it's been in every one of the 25 Bonds, right?
Yeah, and some of the middle ones they used it sparingly. I guess it was maybe after the Saltzman died, and Cubby Broccoli was doing it, and then he died, and his wife kept it up. But there's such a long history of James Bond, and there's always a discussion: who was the best James Bond? Was it Sean Connery? I don't think there's a discussion. It's either Sean Connery or Daniel Craig, if you like the updated versions, because the Roger Moore ones were entertaining, but they were more campy. They were almost like they were spoofing themselves.
Well,
and Pierce Brosnan was pretty good as well.
I like Daniel Craig. I think he did a great job in the 5 that he did. And Connery did 7. He did 6, but then they pulled him out of retirement, probably about money. And the 7th one wasn't good. And
never say never. Again, yeah.
But the other thing that I liked in at least the first half a dozen or 8 or 9 of them is the core team. Moneypenny.
Oh yeah, gosh, yeah. An M and
Lois
Q.
Maxwell. Was Lois Maxwell a looker when she was 20, 25? I guess she was.
Yeah, she was just good looking enough to, but she definitely had a thing for Bond, who, just basically teased her.
MI6 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and the disciplinaries.
Right. So the people that tried to keep James Bond in line.
Right. Knowing full well they couldn't do it. And Q of those, Q was the standout, because he'd go down to see all the new equipment, he'd start messing with stuff, blowing things up, and Q would always be like, don't touch that, don't push that button.
What was your first or the first recollection of a gadget that you can't forget about that he created in James Bond?
The ejector seat.
Absolutely, the red button.
Yeah. In fact, there were Corgi toys. I don't know if you remember them when we were kids. They were heavy metal cars and trucks, and they actually had suspension. They were expensive. You tried to collect them. And after Goldfinger, they came out with the Aston Martin, and you could actually put the shield up in the back, or release the machine guns out the front, or hit the ejector seat, and the roof would fly open, and a little guy would shoot out.
That was something to have as a kid, those kind of toys.
Absolutely,
I think the backpack that he wore, was it in Thunderball?
Yeah.
Where he put the backpack on.
Makes the escape,
what would you call that device? It was kind of like a backpack.
A jetpack?
A jetpack, that's right. And they said most of the gadgets, they were real.
It's believable. Nowadays it's a little different, I think, but They weren't that ridiculous. I mean, remember he had the tricky attaché case where if you push the buttons one way, gas would come out.
It came in handy in Russia with Love.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was another gadget that was on the market for a while. You know, the 007 attaché case, a plastic thing where the knife was in there and the gun, and you know, the products that they sold as a result of these films was, when you're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, you're gobbling that stuff up.
The other one I like, and it was in Russia with Love, is Rosa Klebb. Remember the beginning of the movie? Yeah, she had the knife that came out of kind of like her big toe, and that knife was nothing to mess with. That was worse than a rattlesnake.
Yep, go around trying to kick everybody. The original movies, really kind of set a high bar, and then it kind of, I think they went into neutral through Roger Moore and some of the others. Pierce Bronson, they were okay. The technology and the jumping around, and then when Daniel Craig came along, they took a different approach. He was a much more serious James Bond, and it worked. In my opinion, it worked. It was, I mean, there's always the continuity issues, which I'm a stickler for, like in Casino Royale. One of the big dramatic scenes is when the chief has 4 jacks in the Hold'em game.
Yep.
And he gives him the false tell.
Yeah.
You must have thought I was bluffing, Mr. Bond. And Bond has aces full of kings. There's only one hand that can beat him. It's not like, it was like a hero call.
No.
No one's folding that hand, aces full of kings. They didn't need to set up the false bluff or the false tell, but all those guys in the last hand in Casino Royale felt.
Yeah.
The first guy's got the nut flush. The second guy's got a boat. Third guy's got a higher boat, and then Bond has the straight flush. It's like, yeah, party poker, here we go.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's still entertaining. She was there, and I think Q probably was the longest lasting of that core group, and by default, because James Bond's kept changing, he probably made the most James Bond movies of any one actor.
I'll bet you he was in at least a half of them. There was Sean Connery 7. Craig, so far, is, if he comes back from the dead, is 5, right?
Yeah, he's gonna have to. They're gonna have to erase that last movie for him to come back from the dead.
Craig, I mean, I watched the last one.
Yeah, they killed him. So
we're upset about that. They killed him.
I know.
You can't kill James Bond, right? It's not allowed.
What did I say? He's not dead. This franchise might have decided to end it, but James Bond will be back.
He has to. He has to.
I have a strong opinion about that movie.
Well, let's talk about it.
It transcends the movie itself. It's like, who do they think they are to think they can kill off James Bond? Whoever made that movie, and I don't want to get into the personalities, made a big mistake, because you can't kill James Bond. He's coming back, whether it's with them or somebody else, whether it's Daniel Craig or Idris Elba or any number of people. In today's day and age, it could easily be a woman. It coming back. James Bond's coming back. You can't kill James Bond. The times always play a part in how these movies are made. And in the later Bond movies, like especially the last few with Judi Dench, there's one scene where he's chasing the bad guy.
Yep.
And he's on a motorcycle. He's riding over rooftops. This is James Bond chasing the bad guy, and he's got a headset on.
Yeah.
And M is kind of kibitzing.
Right.
And I'm like, leave the guy alone. It's James Bond. He's 150,000 and 0 in these situations, But she doesn't leave him alone. She says, take the shot, take the shot. They end up shooting him.
I know the answer to my question, so I'm going to ask you. What's the toughest predicament that he got himself out of? I know the one.
Yeah. I go, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. That one I thought was a tough one, where he's strapped down with the laser beam going up the middle with.
You took it right out of my head. Where he's on a table, and the laser beam is on some sort of like roller, and it's coming toward right there.
It's cutting through the steel, and he's like, "Do you expect me to talk, Goldfinger?" No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die. But then he says the magic word. What was it? Operation Grand Slam, and it's like, oh, okay.
What do you know about that?
Let's figure this out. Yeah,
it was Thunderball when he was in that stretching machine, and the attractive physical therapist left him, and then the
Yeah.
bad guy came in and turned it up.
Turns it all the way up.
He's about 3 inches taller after that one, right?
And then he goes and sticks the guy in. The guy's in the steam. The guy who turned it up should have, taken some precautions.
The physical therapist, she was quite attractive.
Yeah, she was a secondary character. She wasn't the main, as my friend Billy McAndrew used to say. She wasn't the horizontal interest.
She's checking out his bruises on his torso, and she gets under there, and he goes like that.
Yeah.
She couldn't wanted him less at that point in the movie, and 5 minutes later, she's getting patted on the neck with a mink hand glove.
Yeah, exactly.
And
that was Bond. That was the unspoken part of James Bond. And again, in today's day and age, look, in my opinion, there's room for every kind of person and every kind of belief in a movie, but they all don't have to be in the same movie.
Right.
So James Bond is you call him a misogynist today if you want to, but he's a ladies' man. They loved him. He loved.
Now he did like a lot of them. I mean,
right. So if you don't like that, you're making a different movie with a different character that isn't like that. But you don't have to decide, we don't want James Bond to be that character anymore. That's crazy.
In their prime, if 50 women were in a room, in a lounge, and James Bond was sitting on the left side of the lounge, and there's all kinds of chairs over there, and on the right side of the lounge was Arnold Palmer, where do you think the pack of women would go?
Are they golfers?
Still don't know the answer to that question because Bond played golf.
I don't know. I know where I'd go, and not for any particular reason, but I'd go see Arnie because who wouldn't want to have a conversation with that guy? But there was no machine ever invented by man, new or old, that James Bond couldn't operate.
Right.
He figured them out in a minute.
A Russian tank he figured out, right?
Yeah. But that's the greatest thing about him. It screamed fiction. So, to look for any kind of societal comments or anything like that out of a James Bond movie is ludicrous. He's a fictional character that did fictional stuff. Unbelievable stuff no one else could ever do, in real life.
So by a man named Ian Fleming, who lived 100 years ago or whatever, give or take. He lived in the Caribbean. Was it Jamaica? That's where he lived. This little place that was beautiful, backed up to the beach. And he wrote on the old-fashioned manual typewriter all these little stories. Incredible. He created this character that's Batman.
Well, not just the character. Then you have the villains. Blofeld or Goldfinger or Vargas in Thunderball. What was his name? Vargas? Or maybe that was the henchman.
Ernst Stavros Blofeld.
But then there was the really Odd Job. They broke the mold after Odd Job. The invincible villain.
He was never. You could never turn him.
You couldn't turn him, and you couldn't beat him unless you're smart like James Bond.
Unless you electrocuted him like Bond did. The bad guys, either the newer version, middle versions, or the older versions. Which was the best of the bad guys in your mind?
Odd Job.
Odd Job.
Odd Job. To me, as a kid, when I saw that movie, and the way I saw it was interesting. I've mentioned it before, but he looked invincible. You didn't know yet that Bond was basically invincible and how he was ever going to get out of that when he's trapped down there with Odd Job. But Odd Job was like, lock the door behind me. I'm going up. I'm going down with the ship. Odd Job could have just hung around and did nothing because James Bond didn't know how to stop the bomb. But instead, they decided to fight until the bomb went off. And fortunately, Bond was able to stop the bomb on, I think it was with 007 seconds left.
But the same thing came up in Diamonds Are Forever, right?
With the two guys. Yeah.
The two guys that every time they met somebody from the school teacher in Antwerp, right? She got it.
Yeah.
Oh, geez. What was she saying? Unless it rained. And then she's in the river face down. And
Mr. Wint?
Kidd, Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd.
Mr. Kidd, yeah. You have to have faith in your audience, in your viewing audience. And the guys who make movies that are, you don't know what's going on, but you have the faith that you're going to know what's going on, like Tarantino or the Coen brothers or, Guy Ritchie, you're going to get the whole story. You're not going to leave the theater thinking, I don't know what happened. Unfortunately, some movies, and a lot of the old movies too, they hit you right over the head with everything. Like Robin Hood, as much as I love Errol Flynn as Robin Hood, how many times do they say, we're meeting tonight in Sherwood Forest, meeting tonight in Sherwood Forest, meeting tonight in Sherwood Forest? It's like 40 times. We get it. You could have said it like twice.
What do you see as the next James Bond film and perhaps character? You mentioned Eldris. I'd like to see him as.
I'd love to see him doing it, but I think what's going to happen now is there's going to be one or two horrible attempts at either making a woman James Bond, which I have no problem with, except she's not going to be James Bond. So, if you want to create a woman agent that has the capabilities or even more capabilities than James Bond, do it. Make her 008. But then, as always happens, the need will arise. Somebody will see it like, let's make a great James Bond movie. And then they'll come up with maybe with somebody you've never heard of, who knows? But they hit the nail on the head as far as sticking with the character, the capability of the character, the flying around. You get to see the world, you get to see the gadgets, you got to see him flying, jumping around and chasing people up buildings and down girders. And, it was entertainment top to bottom. No statements.
You said you like to watch the opening credits. To me, that's why I've watched Dr. No, which is my favorite, more times than any other one, because I think the beginning of it, the simplicity of the three blind guys walking to the club, and then the guys playing, the privileged guys, playing cards in the middle of the day. Yeah, probably late in the day. It was probably 4:00. Let's give them credit that they might have worked from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2.
Nobody was working down there.
Nobody was working down there. It was one big tea. And then when you were finished with tea, you went home, took a nap, and then you went out to dinner at 9 o'clock and repeated.
And you might have bumped into James Bond, if you're
the baccarat table.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that I like that, and the journeys, as I said in other episodes, is what I like in movies, and they deliver.
Yeah, that's a great point. I agree.
Whether you're in the cockpit or you're on a train or you're on the motorcycle with them.
But the scenery is great. Yeah.
Who's your favorite Bond beauty?
I kind of liked Ursula Andress, and she was married to John Derek.
Yep.
Who then ended up marrying Bo Derek.
Oh wait, he married her and Bo Derek?
Yeah.
What a quidella.
Yeah. There might have been, and Linda Evans as well.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he kind of had
a type.
And he was a photographer. And years ago, actually, I was out at a boxing match in Las Vegas. I ran Barkley against Tommy Hearns. And Bo Derek was there. We were at the press meetings and stuff like that because my friend owned the contract on Barkley, who beat Hearns in a big upset. So I actually had my picture taken with Bo Derek by John Derek with my camera.
Fun, but Ursula Andress is my favorite.
Yeah,
he can't talk back to you, right? He never talks except right here. What was it? A Penfolds number 1 or Penfolds number 7?
I'm playing a Slazenger. Strict rules of golf, Mr. Goldfinger.
Well, it does come back to golf. Those weren't gutta perches. They weren't quite balladas, but he put one of those Penfolds in and he crushed it to dust.
Yeah.
So
that's what was so great. Even Bond's face when he does that is like, oh boy, this is not going to be an easy, finale with this guy.
Maybe he wasn't even as good an actor as Brad Pitt, but he was a good actor.
He could play his parts, and he had the charisma. His voice, the way he talked, very enjoyable character. You're on trains going all over the world. You're in planes. You're crashing. That's the beautiful thing about James Bond.
You're up
it's
in the
fiction.
moon. You're in the moon.
Yeah.
You're getting swallowed by the big capsule.
The big spaceship is.
That's in You Only Live Twice, right? Where
they're shooting rocket ships out of the volcano.
I forget where she had a bikini on and she took the little tape recorder and put it in her bikini. And
that's Jill St. John.
That's in Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jill St. John was a great Bond girl.
You're showing a little too much cheek.
Well, the part I like is the beginning when he pretends to be Peter Franks and comes up to her room and she walks in. What does she do? She walks in as a blonde.
Yeah.
And when she says, wait, I'll slip into something more comfortable, within 30 seconds she comes out and she's a redhead.
Yeah.
And she gets him to have a drink. just for the purposes of getting his thumbprint, right? To
Yeah.
do a fingerprint check on him.
Yeah.
Another great gadget. She
Yeah.
had a fingerprint reader.
And she was so much more capable in the beginning of that movie than at the end. You know? That little cassette that she took out, Bond had already switched it, and then she undid what he did.
He saved the world and she unsaved the world. And he
Yeah.
said, we better get out of here.
Yeah. And that's the other thing you could always count on in pretty much every Bond movie. In the last 10 minutes, everything's blowing up. Everything's blowing up. There's not going to be anything left standing wherever he is. The whole place is coming down. Whether it's Casino Royale, where Venice basically comes all down. Actually, Goldfinger's an exception to that, but pretty much the only exception. They couldn't blow up Fort Knox.
No.
I'm sorry, but James Bond can't be a girl. 007 can't be a girl.
Thank you. 008 can be a girl.
Yeah.
And he's like, do you expect me to talk, Goldfinger? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
The first time you see James Bond ever, everything he did was cool.
Yep. Bond. James Bond.
Why are you laughing?
Well, at least we have the laugh to add at the end.
Right. We've gone from 12 handicaps at this to 19 handicaps in just a week.
That's what happened. Somebody changed my grip, and the next thing you know, I can't do the podcast anymore. I felt like I was in the first row of the first pew at church, right during the sermon.
And your brother was poking
My
you.
brother was making me laugh.
Thanks for joining us
Casper.
today.
Billy
We
Harmon,
really appreciate your
Double
feedback.
Indemnity,
And please
Arky,
subscribe to the
Two
show.
Rider,
Hit 'em
Odd
hard
Job,
and hit 'em off.
Best 36 Holes.